Perhaps it's a good thing that, as the Chief Justice said, I can hide behind the podium without exposing my feet. Because I am quite nervous when approaching such a fundamental issue that touches the hearts of so many people in Hong Kong. When we say we support the Occupy Central movement, we have to remember the context of the society that we live in. Because we believe on the proposition that Hong Kong represents a vibrant society which is proud and unafraid to fight for the rights that it deserves. We've seen time and again when the Hong Kong people have taken to the streets to defend our freedoms. For example, going against Article 23. For example, going against national and moral education. And so when it comes to perhaps the single most unifying topic within Hong Kong politics, the issue of universal suffrage and democracy, we say we have the legitimate right to action. We say we have the support for a movement. And in the light of the fact that most of our other options have failed, we are very proud to support the Occupy Central movement. Three things I want to talk about. Firstly, why is it legitimate for us to act in this way? What's the popular support behind Occupy Central? Secondly, I want to take a look at the wider principle of civil disobedience and why it applies in Hong Kong. Thirdly, why specifically the Occupy movement is probably the best thing we have on the table to push for the things and reforms that we push. So with regards to this first point about the legitimacy of action, we say that an overwhelming proportion of Hong Kong people want to do something with regards to universal suffrage, right? We say this not only consistent across multiple demographics, whether it's young or old or different intersectional groups, and thank you, but it's also consistent across the years, right? Since the initial formation of the Legislative Council and initiation of more public debate and public discussion about politics back in the times of the British, we say this has been a consistent wish by a majority of the Hong Kong people. We clearly see at least some form of legitimacy to be calling and acting towards universal suffrage, right? But the second thing is that we've also tried a lot of things. And even though we've already had a degree of success in, for example, getting a promise of the potential for universal suffrage in 2017, what we say is that this promise has not only been sliding already and being pushed back continuously, it is in danger of simply becoming yet another token claim for Beijing if we don't step up the pressure to do something else and different to defend the right to this concession. So the second thing I want to talk about is the principle of civil disobedience. Why is this so important that we take up these steps? Well, historically we say that over the years, some of the most successful democratic movements have been born out of civil disobedience. We accept that civil disobedience might come with some hard times. When we take a look at, for example, the efforts of Gandhi, of Mandela, of Solidarity in Poland, of the Sunshine Revolution in South Korea, which have all led to reasonable degrees of success, far better than what these countries have beforehand, we say civil disobedience has a reasonable track record. So why is it particularly applicable in Hong Kong, right? We say that in Hong Kong we already have a reasonable degree of political association in the form of our political party system. We already have sufficient legitimacy to push for these kinds of things, as I've said. Where democratic negotiations and movements will fail in the context of Hong Kong is if we allow Beijing, for example, to simply stonewall negotiations and push it backwards, to try to divide and rule our political parties and our elites in the society through piecemeal action, and to also simply let the passage of time defeat the enthusiasm that Hong Kong people currently have for this kind of thing. We say we can't allow this kind of thing to happen. We would definitely want to push for some more substantive action. Yes.
What level of financial disruption do you expect from the Occupy Central movement?
We expect a large degree of financial disruption, ladies and gentlemen. And this completely takes me on to my next point. Why Occupy Central? No, thank you. Not only will it cause disruption, which is primarily the reason why we think Beijing and the elites of our society will probably care about this movement, having an actual substantive threat to the well-being of the elites in Hong Kong, as well as the Beijing's interest to force them towards a more substantive concession. We also think that it's actually the best option on the table. We've already got the Pan Democrats, for example, coming out and saying that this is a reasonable option, right? But also beyond that, we also say that we have a comparative look at some of the other democratic movements around the world concerning the nature of, an occupied movement. We think that Occupy Hong Kong is actually a pretty good one, right? We we have reasonably respected figureheads, or at least members of society, at the leadership of this kind of Occupy movement. We say it's also got a far more concentrated and focused political ideology and an aim in terms of what it's aiming for, namely universal suffrage. So, in a comparative context, it's still doing pretty well compared to most of the other Occupy movements we see around. But furthermore, to answer this point again, we think that the Occupy movement is precisely what would make people care. What makes Beijing and the elites of our society recognize that this would be something different from what we've done before. Because this time, by embracing an Occupy movement, instead of simply having a march from Victoria Park into the central government offices, we will make people care. We would be disrupting the lives and livelihoods of many people. But it's primarily, ladies and gentlemen, many of the middle class, many of the disillusioned people who are currently in Hong Kong who want to push for universal suffrage, who will be engaging in this Occupy movement. It's the businesses who currently have contingency plans moving away from Central if this were to happen. It's Beijing and our elites who will be worried and threatened under this kind of policy. And it's these kind of people that we need to target, the authorities and relevant people involved, that need to have that attitude change and push towards the tipping point where we can push for something substantial. Ladies and gentlemen, we support the Occupy movement, and we think that it's definitely the best option for Hong Kong.
Hello? Okay, sorry, I don't have as large of a voice as he does. Okay. Ben earlier said proud and unafraid. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 930,000 people, proudly and unafraid, have come out actively against the Occupy Central movement today. Today in my speech, I want to tackle Ben's theories about this kind of legitimacy of the movement, how it has captured the popular support. And in my speech, I want to tackle the issues of the current trends, whether where democracy is sliding backwards, and how Occupy Central is the best means to achieve and push for universal suffrage. Secondly, I want to look at this issue of civil disobedience, specifically in the case of Hong Kong, with regards to its past protests. And finally, I want to look at this issue of economic disruption to the people and whether it's legitimate. After that, I'll move on to my main substantive on issues to do with the pan-democratic movement and how ultimately this motion will hurt such democratic progress. Now on to the first issue. Today, Ben came out and said that democracy has slided back quite a bit since the early days of Hong Kong, that somehow Beijing is grasping more and more power from the people, and that universal suffrage is ever more a distant goal. But even if we can see that trend, we don't see how Occupy Central is actually the way to achieve any progress on that front. We think just because the status quo is bad and getting worse, it doesn't prove that your solution is the right way to go about to tackle it. In fact, that leads me nicely onto the second point in terms of civil disobedience with regards to Hong Kong. He actually mentioned in his speech about Article 23 and the previous success of national education. But ladies and gentlemen, let's draw the comparison here. In those times, all of them were single issue kind of policies. In each case, they're not like the fundamental structural change universal suffrage would be. And a protest like Occupy Central is not enough to push for such a fundamental change. Rejecting a proposal by the government is very different from trying to push a proposal onto the government. And so because of this, just because you cite civil disobedience having minute success in other areas of the world doesn't show why it's applicable to the Hong Kong population here today. No, thank you, sir. Now to the third issue of disruption. I'm glad you conceded it will have large ramifications and economic disruption. But for some reason, you seem to think this will only affect the elite and the big businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you, who can weather a bad economic recession more? Small businesses or large multinational corporations? We're telling you it's the moderates, the middle class, and the small businesses that will be hurt by such an Occupy movement. And I'll go on later into my speech when I talk about do the people actually want it, or is it a legitimate movement, and tell you why this is especially bad. Now to the main issue of whether the people today want it. The Occupy Central movement has claimed to be a democratic movement, so that it is legitimate in pushing for universal suffrage. But really the movement as a means has failed to capture sufficient investment of interest from the Hong Kong population. In the questionable electronic poll, no identity verification they conducted, only 10% of the Hong Kong population voted. And then there's the anti-Occupy movement, which did a personal ballot with over 900,000 people actively against the Occupy Central. Why is this significant? It shows that Occupy Central not only has an inadequate and distorted number of supporters, there is a movement bigger than that, actively against it. And then there's the 78% of us who you've just so graciously assumed silent consent to your plan. Now, why is that unacceptable? Practically, it makes it difficult to achieve universal suffrage without the support of the population. Even Benny Tai, the originator of the movement, said an optimistic number of the supporters would be 1% of the Hong Kong population. Occupy Central, principally, it's objectionable. Because if democracy is about representation and power of the people, Occupy Central is the least democratic way to go about it. And not only that, if you've conceded to economic damage, we say that's especially bad, because you definitely do not hamstring the economy without the consent of the people you are inadvertently hurting as well. Right now, the Occupy Central has not given a choice to the silent majority, whether they would like to make a trade-off between economic stability and gaining advantages in universal suffrage. You cannot simply assume that your plan is legitimate at this point. Yes, sir.
Matt, 60% of the Hong Kong population support the pan-democrats and support the idea of universal suffrage. How is there not a popular legitimacy to do something to push towards it?
Sure, sir. You might support universal suffrage all you want, but do people support Occupy Central as a means to achieve that? No. Others, more people would have come out in support of Occupy Central like they did for universal suffrage. Now to the second issue of the pan-democratic movement. So we don't support Occupy Central as a means to achieve such universal suffrage because in its all-or-nothing approach, it has successfully broken up the once powerful pan-democratic movement. The first option that they tend is if the pan-democrats do back down. And this harms the movement's general strength because it looks as if, because they haven't given themselves any leeway for retreat. Any less than universal suffrage would look like a total failure on part of the movement. The second option is that if it doesn't back down, it will receive reluctant support or criticism from democratic parties internally and externally. Just look at the Civic Party divided with the moderate member Ronnie Tong openly coming out to seek a compromise and objecting to the Occupy Central movement. Even the largest Democratic Party has quit the Alliance for True Democracy due to a lack of cooperation with more radical parties. Once the largest political party in Hong Kong, dominating the Legislative Council, now the 20-year-old party hangs in soul-searching limbo, beaten out by the likes of former Miss Hong Kongs in district councils elections, as a result of being seen too radical with the Occupy Central movement. And why is this bad? It's because if your very goal is to push for democratic progress and universal suffrage, and you don't even have any leverage in the legal means to push for that because of your fractured democratic camps, then we don't see how you're ever going to achieve universal suffrage with the Occupy Central movement. So for all those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to be proud and unafraid to stand against Occupy Central.
Speak. There will be 1 minute of preparation time, and after the 1 minute preparation time is up, we will have the opposition concluding speaker speak first. So just a little background on these two teams. They have not been really preparing for this motion, although the grand finals motion was released around a week, 2 weeks ago, but because they did not know whether or not they would be breaking, their preparation was mostly done 40 minutes ago. So, at this juncture, I would also like to introduce our esteemed grand finalist adjudication panel. And chairing our adjudication panel, we have, of course, the Honorable Chief Justice Ma, who is going to be chairing the panel. But sharing the panel with him, we also have Mevesh, who is a very esteemed, internationally acclaimed adjudicator who has been on the chief adjudication panel of many world championships. So if everyone could give Mevesh a very warm round of applause. We also have Mr. Greg Force, who is the Hong Kong National World Schools Debating Championships coach and has been for a while now. He has also adjudicated and coached many national teams, and we're very, very honored to have him with us today. We also are very honored to have Mr. Roy Allen, who is on the governing board of the newly founded charity of the HKSDC. And we are very, very happy that he has come here to share his experience with us. And he has also been adjudicating many debates and has also been very involved in the development of the Hong Kong debating and public speaking community. And last but not least, we are very excited to have with us today Ms. Genevieve Yu, who was, back in 2008, the first person to bring Hong Kong to the World Individuals Public Speaking Championships, and so therefore started another chapter of the Hong Kong debating and public speaking community. And we're also extremely excited to say that the individuals will be moving to new territory when Hong Kong is hosting it next year in 2015. And we're very excited to have Ms. Yu with us today as well. So without further ado, can I double check that we do have a chairperson and timekeeper with us, Vanessa? And so, are there any questions from the two teams? If not, then we'll give the stage to our two grand finalists. And just a last, to tell you guys, you can choose to speak from the podium, but if you're more comfortable speaking from your table, there is also a mic that you can use, although the podium will be yours should you wish to use it.